Yo guys, what's going on? It's me, Daniel from Tech Tuning, and today I'm going to be teaching you guys how to rebuild your brake calipers, and hopefully by the end of this video you can take a brake caliper like this and turn it into something more like this. So the purpose of today's video is just going to be walking you guys through on rebuilding a caliper, and in my instance it's going to be specifically for the Celicas, but it's pretty general information. You could use it for most other calipers, and in this instance we're just looking at a single floating piston caliper. So, hope you guys enjoy. The first thing that we're going to start with rebuilding these calipers is just going to be breaking them down. So I already took the bolts out of here which hold it onto the car, and after that we've just got the one right here, which when we take this one out, you're going to be able to unhinge it and you can slide the caliper off of the remaining pin. And now we have the two separate components. So we're just going to take off all of these little brake pad shims, and these will either get cleaned up or replaced. I'm not sure if my new pads come with them or not, so I'm just saving them for now just in case I need to reuse them. But usually the pads will come with new ones. So we're just going to take those off, and once these are off, we have the two main pieces that we're working with. So what we're going to start by doing is taping off all of these little rubber pieces here, because like I said, I'm not going to be replacing these. I'm just going to be replacing the main dust boot and cleaning out the bore of the piston and everything so that it's all nice and functional. So we're going to tape off these, and then we're going to get to sanding away some of this rust so that we can repaint it. And then I'll show you guys, before we repaint it actually, I'll show you how to pop out the piston and replace this whole dust boot. Alright, so at this point we've gotten the bulk of what we can get off with the big steel wire wheel off, but there's going to be spots like underneath the caliper, and if you look at the other piece, in these small grooves that you really can't reach with it because it's just too large. So at this point I'm going to be switching to the smaller brass bristled ones for a Dremel. I purchased like a 70 pack of these off of Amazon, because what you'll find with the brass ones, at least compared to like the steel, is they're much softer. They're still very effective at getting this stuff off the surface, but because they're softer, they literally fall apart in a matter of like minutes when you're using them. So for like $15 I bought this giant box of them because I've been burning through them really quickly. But they're gonna be just as efficient as getting this stuff off. You're just gonna have to swap out the bit a lot more. So we're going to switch to the Dremel, and we're going to use those, and we're going to keep working away at getting some of this stuff off the surface. Alright, so as you guys can see, I've got the caliper set up here, and I've got a block of wood sitting in front of the piston. What we're going to do is, now that my compressor is filled up, I have one of these regular just spray nozzles on, and making sure that the bleeder valve is in and it's screwed down, we're going to go to the opening where the brake line would go, and that's where we're going to apply the pressurized air to force the piston out as if it was brake fluid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first shoot that out, and it's going to pop the piston just enough to hit the wood. Then I'm going to take the wood out, and so that there's more room for the piston to go all the way out, we're going to put the rag in place, and then we're going to use that to get it the remainder of the way. And you definitely want to be using some sort of eye protection when you're doing this, just because it's pressurized. and you never know what could happen. It is going to come out, and you can see mine is in horrible condition, which is why we're rebuilding these. So what we're going to do next is we are going to remove the dust boot, and we're going to remove the seal. And once we do that, we're going to use the same brass bristle wire wheels to clean out the inside of the bore as well as the piston. And use the brass because it's soft and it won't deteriorate or wear away the inside. You should not be using steel though. If you would rather do it in a less time-consuming way, you could get citric acid and water, and you could put that in there as a sort of solvent solution, but I wasn't able to find it at any of my local stores, so I'm going with the brass wheels since I bought so many anyway. And what we're looking at now is to remove this dust shield. Since it's so dried up on mine and I'm not going to replace it, I'm just going to try and pull it on out. So now that that's out, we're going to just also take out the cylinder seal, which is much easier. It's just like a thick rubber band. Right here we have that, and that's going to get replaced as well. And so now we have our bare stripped down piston, and from this point what I'm going to do is I'm going to hose it down with some brake cleaner just to try and get any of that loose gunk out. Once that's cleaned up, we're going to go back to the Dremel with the brass wheels, and we're going to clean it out and inspect to make sure it's still worth rebuilding. If there's too much corrosion, then it's not going to be worth rebuilding. We're better off just junking it. But we're going to first clean it out and just take a look at it and see, you know, what the condition is. The things that I have here are the piston, and I cleaned the ring and everything as best as I can, and it looks pretty dirty, but it's all smooth, so I know it should be fine to reuse. I have the piston that we prepped, or the caliper that we prepped, and we got that ready to go. I have a couple sets of needle nose pliers, obviously the rebuild kit here, which includes a new ring, a seal, and a dust boot, and then I have a little bit of .3 brake fluid, which we're going to use to be lubricating everything as we work. So the first thing that I'm going to go ahead and do, and it's very important that you make sure you're wearing gloves when you do this because you don't want brake fluid all over yourself, is I'm going to take a little dab of it on my finger, and I'm going to run it around the bore of our brake caliper here. And I'm just going to try and get it in all the grooves the best that I can. And what this will help us do is, if we have to stop for any time, it'll prevent the cylinder from flash rusting at all, now that there's a little bit of an oil on there. And we're also going to put it on the bore of the piston. And at this point, it's really important you try and keep dirt and particles away from what you're working on. You don't want to drop this stuff or have like dust blowing around you, because any of those particles are going to get in there and they're going to lodge up the system, and that's how you're going to wind up with brake failures. So next, I'm going to take our seal, and I'm going to try and get some brake fluid on that as well. That'll help it slip into the groove it's going to sit into. So now that we've got it pretty nicely soaked up, you're going to see that there's two rings inside the piston. There's going to be an outer and an inner one. This seal is going to go on the inner one. So if you look where I'm lining it up here, that's going to fall into this inner one. And we have that. What we're going to do is take out our ring and our new piston dust shield. I'm going to first install my dust boot onto the piston. So we're going to pop the inside ring around the edge of that. And once that's inserted, we're going to press the piston all the way into the cylinder, and we're going to try and pop the ring of this dust boot in as well. Because this dust boot, the ring here that you see, this little extra thick part on the rubber, you can see that it expands out
and that's what happens when the piston moves in and out. But this ring will stay inside the cylinder, and then this ring is what's gonna hold it to the piston. So when we push the piston all the way in, we're just gonna wanna try and pop that outer ring into this groove as well. But what you really just wanna be careful of is that you don't rip these boots when you're putting the ring in. So caliper completely rebuilt with new seals and a new dust boot and clip. So the next step for me is I wiped it all down with isopropyl alcohol, and as you guys saw, I taped off all the parts that I don't want to get paint on, and I'm waiting for another piece. I already did the retaining like bracket piece. I painted that. I'm waiting for that to dry. Once that dries, we're gonna hang this one up and we're gonna paint this one. When it's all done and dried, then we'll install a new bleeder screw, and this will be all set to go. So let's get started on painting this. Alright guys, so at this point we're at the last step where you have your painted caliper with your new seals and everything put in. All that's going to be left for us to do is to take the two pieces and reassemble them. So we're going to go over re-greasing the slides and then putting the screws back in and putting it all back together before you reinstall it. This is what I'm using. This is just regular brake lubricant for pads, for slides, and for any other contact points. So we're just going to talk about applying some of this and then putting it back together. In the case of these calipers, the main things that we're going to want to grease is going to be inside the bolt that holds the caliper to the bracket, because you don't want any corrosion getting these two things seized together. And then right here we have the slide pin for the caliper itself, which we're also going to want to put some grease in, as well as the actual pin itself. We're going to want to grease before we put that back into the sliding slot. What I would recommend doing before you apply grease is taking a little bit of brake clean and just cleaning off the pin and any other surfaces that might have dirt. If you have any dirt on any of these surfaces before you grease them, it'll just stay there and slowly start to work its way into your system. It's best to get these things as clean as possible before you reassemble everything. So all I did is throw some brake clean right here, and I'm just going to give this a good wipe down. And I'm also going to clean off our bolt before we grease that. Just kidding, I misplaced my new bleeder screw, so I'm just going to throw the original one back in for now, but you get the concept that if you have a new one, take the old one out, put the new one in. It's not that crazy, and it's just an 8mm wrench to do that. And once again, you just want to snug it down, not too tight, especially with these, because if you over tighten it and you strip it, you won't be able to get it out. You'll have to just drill it out or replace your entire caliper, which is not something you want to do on these cars, since finding front calipers and rear calipers for these is hard enough as it is. So be careful with the bleeder screws, but then you're all set. Alrighty guys, so you now have your finished rebuilt brake caliper for your Toyota Celica or your Toyota Celica Supra. I hope this video was somewhat comprehensive. I know it wasn't probably the best tutorial, but I more so wanted to make a video going over rebuilding these specific car ones than I did just rebuilding any caliper. So either way, I hope you guys enjoyed watching the process. I look forward to hopefully seeing you guys in the video where I install these and my future videos to come. So thank you guys for watching.